Hi, this channel's host has a speech impairment. She may be a little hard to understand at first, but if you stick around, you'll get used to it. Also, this channel is going to have a lot of true crime content. Viewer discretion is advised. Now on with the show.
Police were on scene for less than 20 seconds when Victor Perez was shot. By the time his family realized what was happening in their backyard, the 17-year-old, nonverbal, autistic, and living with cerebral palsy had already been struck by a barrage of bullets. What followed was not a question of what Victor did, but whether anyone recognized who he was. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're here. Today we'll be talking about Victor Perez, a 17-year-old from Idaho who was autistic and had cerebral palsy. His case raises questions about police interactions with people with disabilities. I chose this case because he has cerebral palsy, and it is Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. I'm currently working on a video about cerebral palsy, and that will be on my channel shortly. But for now, let's jump into this case and learn about Victor Perez. Victor Perez, a death at the intersection of disability and policing. Chapter 1, Introduction. Victor Perez was 17 years old when he was shot by police in Pocatello, Idaho in April 2025. To his family, Victor was a son and a brother who required constant support. He was nonverbal, autistic, and lived with cerebral palsy, conditions that affected both his mobility and his ability to understand or respond to verbal commands. At home, these realities were well known and managed. To the officers who encountered him that afternoon, they were not. The gap between who Victor was and who the police believed they were confronting would prove fatal. Chapter 2, the 911 call that set events in motion. On April 5th, a neighbor called 911 reporting a backyard disturbance. According to dispatch records, the caller described a man who appeared intoxicated and was holding a knife during a family altercation. The caller did not indicate that the individual was a minor, disabled, or nonverbal. This information shaped the police response. Officers were dispatched under the assumption that they were heading into a potentially violent situation involving an armed adult. No mental health professionals or crisis negotiators were sent. No additional contact was requested before officers arrived. Chapter 3, A Matter of Seconds. 4 Pocatello police officers arrived at the scene in rapid succession. Body camera footage later showed that within 12 to 16 seconds of their arrival, officers had drawn their weapons and opened fire. Victor was standing behind a low chain-link fence. He had a knife, a fact that remains undisputed. Officers shouted commands for him to drop the weapon. Victor did not comply. According to investigators, he stood up and moved slightly forward. For officers trained to interpret noncompliance and threat escalation, that movement was decisive. Multiple shots were fired. Victor was struck at least a dozen times. Chapter 4: Survival Then Death. Victor did not die at the scene. He was rushed to the hospital with catastrophic injuries. Surgeons amputated one of his legs in an effort to save his life. He remained hospitalized, unconscious, and dependent on life support. 7 days later, on April 12, 2025, Victor's family made the decision to withdraw life support. He died surrounded by relatives who, in the days following the shooting, began publicly explaining who Victor was and what officers had not known. Chapter 5: The Legal Response. The shooting was investigated by the Eastern Idaho Critical Incident Task Force and reviewed by the Idaho Attorney General Office. In September 2025, prosecutors announced that no criminal charges would be filed against the officers. The decision rested on a familiar legal standard: whether officers reasonably believed deadly force was necessary based on the information available to them at the time. Prosecutors emphasized that officers were responding to a report of an armed individual and were not informed of Victor's disability or age. The Perez family disagreed with that framing. They filed a federal civil rights lawsuit alleging excessive force, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and constitutional violations. The case remains ongoing. Chapter 6: What the Case Reveals. The death of Victor Perez sparked protests, vigils, and renewed debate over how law enforcement responds to people with disabilities. Disability advocacy organizations argued that the case exposed systemic failures, inadequate training, rapid escalation, and a lack of protocols for recognizing neurodivergency and physical disabilities in crisis situations. Critics noted that Victor was behind a fence, that officers fired within seconds, and that no de-escalation tactics were attempted. Law enforcement officers countered that officers cannot be expected to diagnose disabilities in the moment and must prioritize public safety when a weapon is presented. Victor Perez did not die because the system misunderstood his diagnosis. He died because it never slowed down long enough to ask who stood in front of him. His case forces an uncomfortable reckoning. When disability is mistaken for defiance and seconds matter more than context, the cause is not measured in policy failures, but in lives lost. Well, that's it for Victor Perez's case. I hope you found this video interesting and informative, and it prompted you to ask several questions about how disability should be treated when seconds mattered. I know I probably should give you my take, but honestly, I don't know. This is a tough question that I'm not sure if there is a black and white solution. I think the cop kind of shot very quickly, but on the other hand, he did have a knife. So I'm not sure where you draw the line. I'm not a black and white person. I always gray. And this story definitely falls in the gray area. I know in social media you're supposed to have black and white opinions, but that's not my style. I always see gray. Well, I hope you found this video interesting and informative, and it made you think. Thanks for watching. If you like this content, you know what to do. Goodbye.